Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Expand Remote Work and Hybrid Cloud, Supporting the New Normal in Work. This event is brought to you in partnership with Rubrik. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know about the event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be serving as your moderator. We want this to be an educational event, and we encourage your questions in the questions box. We also have a number of handouts available for download in the Handouts tab. And finally, we'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card at the end of the presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm excited now to introduce you to Mr. Robert Rame, Director of Market Intelligence at Rubrik. Robert, always great to have you on.
Thanks, Dave. It's good to be here again.
Excellent. Well, with that, take it away.
Okay. All right. Well, so this is a decidedly non-sales oriented presentation. I do have the obligatory, who is Rubrik slides up front, but I'm going to try to contextualize that to what your challenges are as IT professionals. David said, the new normal. I've been calling it the new abnormal. And then you've heard people say, oh yeah, I work from home. I actually, well, you know what I mean. So I guess the long and short of it is, let's start off with the challenges around backup and some of the things that Rubrik does. If you're not familiar with us, we were founded back in 2014, 2015 we launched. And one of the things that we started as is actually as a file system. So a forward chaining file system that very efficiently links the data blocks under storage and extrapolates or abstracts the storage underneath. So the first application that we built on top of that is backup. Now, why is that relevant? The relevance there is because we can grab metadata from incoming content under management. But what this really means to you is if you're doing backup as one of the multiple things, a typical IT team, you might have 3 people working on backup, nobody dedicated. They're all, they've all got 3 different things that they're working on, maybe network backup and maybe a database. And it depends on the size and the type of mode of your IT team. But you're probably running something where you're familiar with managing the storage, managing the backup, and everything else. And I've got the word automated there on the screen. Now look at all the different things that fall into what a backup solution usually does. There's the targets, the servers, the proxies, the jobs themselves, offsites. It's just a big nightmare, and that's one of the very unique things that Rubrik's done. And it's very interesting because what we do is we consolidate all of this stuff down to one SLA. Now, this SLA allows you to define pretty much everything you need for a backup job in one specific place without having to worry about the storage. This is a radical simplification that's unique within the backup market. There's no other vendor that does this. I don't compare to other vendors, but this one is definitely true. They'll always say, yeah, we're simple too, but when you look at it and how easy it is to actually simplify the entire backup infrastructure, Rubrik stands alone there. So the next is really, because of this file system that I was just talking about, this forward chaining immutable file system, we can accelerate recoveries by doing very fast, no penalty, instant mounts, instant live mounts or instant recoveries. That's really relevant for a lot of different things, ransomware, test dev, any sort of life cycle management type stuff that you need to do, but you don't want to touch the production system. It's also very useful when you get hit during a ransomware attack. And that's one of the things that's very relevant with us. Our protection against ransomware. There's also other areas where we help. Now we help. We can live mount from Oracle, SQL, whatever. So it's that same functionality goes across our platform. The next is really the amount of time that you spend with what I call the refresh hamster wheel. And I'll talk about this later on in the presentation as well, and actually contextualize this down to why it matters. Now, this is kind of a top, top level 70 to 80% or 70 to 90% total cost savings. Now, that's a hard thing to quantify. If you go back to the automation, typically our customers save anywhere between 60 to 90+%. Average is going to be somewhere between 70 to 80. Now, that's the time that you save on backup and you don't focus on something that's not innovative. So one of the things that we do is that we align generally with your cloud journey. So that's something that I'll be talking about this also later. About 60% of the folks that are in this presentation probably have not gotten to the point where they're scaling their cloud journey, but likely you're already at the point where you're leveraging some cloud services. We align with you at that point. Then the next thing is really the cloud migration. Now, I don't generally recommend lift and shift except for tactical, mainly because it's like the airplane scene where the guy jumps in the back of the taxi and Stryker jumps back in and turns on the meter and he's there at the end of the movie as well. The main thing is that lift and shift can get very expensive. So when you do it, you want to make sure that you're doing it with the right workloads. Now, this is something that we align very, very well with. We can get workloads up to the cloud. You can get them turned on. And then the next step really is the cloud native protection. Now, sadly, this is a very small percentage of probably even the people that are in this call. If you look at it, when I use the 60% number, there's a lot of folks that have not even gotten to the cloud. I'd say probably 20%. So that doesn't leave a huge number of people that are already doing more than one cloud native application. But we can protect you there as well. And it's operational simplicity for hybrid cloud, so native cloud management. So have a look at us. I'm going to kind of step away from the sales with the next slide. The main thing that you're looking for here is that we can extend to the cloud, we can protect your workloads in the cloud under a unified umbrella of metadata management, and that's because of our file system. We've built a SaaS application called Polaris that gives you ransomware for cyber resilience. The modernization you get, of course, through the SLA type thing. The data governance, we have something called Sonar, and this is being consolidated into the security suite. So this metadata that we are able to abstract, we're able to notice when there's an anomaly within the file system and tell you exactly what's been hit by ransomware and give you a roadmap to recovery. Sonar is something that gives you the capability to inspect things for policy violations. So the actually looking in the things looking for PII or credit card numbers or social security numbers out of place and give you a report there. Okay, now let's get into something that talks about what your problems are. Skills gaps hold us back from reaching our objectives. I'm a former Gartner analyst, and I've heard this quote from CIOs and IT leaders over and over again, and it is a very, very common problem. I made a prediction about what was going to be the biggest problem in 2021 or the biggest trend for cloud, and I said it was going to be skills gaps. Now, this is something that's sort of interesting because it actually a former colleague of mine also published that. I was totally independent there, but skills gaps is something that really does generally hold back an IT organization, and I think generally most folks are going about solving this in the wrong way. So what's happening really is that we're seeing about this silo blur between infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, this whole distributed cloud thing that's sort of evolving. Now 60% of you all are probably in the initial and maturing phase and probably not in the scaling area. Now when I'm talking about silos, I'm not talking about these three silos of maturity. I'm actually talking about PaaS merging with SaaS. So we're talking about a SaaS application that doesn't even have necessarily an interface. It's not consumed by users, it's consumed by businesses. It's essentially this algorithmic type thing where, if I could name a couple, but it's really this data as a service thing. So where you get insights or you can actually connect an application to a SaaS service and get insights into an application. Now these are this whole thing is merging and getting a little bit blurry. And I think that's kind of a relevant thing that you need to watch in terms of modernizing your applications, or at least getting ready for this. So the main thing here is that I use the 8 ball because you're behind the 8 ball. Now I want you to look at this very closely and recognize any patterns. Now, if you say that skills are blocking you, or that you can't hire this person or that person, and that's blocking your projects, or you don't have the know-how, let's look backwards in time just 3 to 5 years. If you look at InfoSec, for example, man, that was completely underfunded. If you even had somebody in InfoSec who was dedicated, you probably only had one. Maybe you had a dedicated InfoSec team, but then you were probably a larger organization. This whole thing where InfoSec is everybody's job, that's a pure product of the fact that you can't get people. You can't get practitioners right now. And if you can, and you're a smaller organization, then you might not be able to retain them. And this was 2016, 2017. What happened was we had a couple big wake up calls, and the board and the CEO said, "Oh, wait a second, no, let's hire people." Okay, well, there was a pretty small community at that point. And it was hard to attract and retain people because suddenly they were in high demand, excuse me. AI/ML. One of my Gartner colleagues who did AI and ML in Germany. I'm actually in Germany. You can hear from my accent. I'm not from here. I'm actually from South Carolina. But the long and short of it is that back in 2017 there was only 85 people that really knew anything about it in New York City. So that's a geographical problem as well as a talent gap that's very hard to bridge. Now, we've shored that up in the last few years, but anytime something pops up, you've always got this kind of you're behind the 8 ball type thing. So IoT, how many of you think about this? I obviously can't answer, but how many of you have scaled IoT solutions? I mean, if you look at the ecosystem for IoT, it's complex. There's nothing unified unless you're maybe in agriculture. And then there's a couple of solutions that I found. But essentially, you've got a lot of building blocks, and nobody really knows how to piece them all together. You can start by, trying a couple of different incubator type things and learning that way. But if you look back to 2015, everybody was talking about IoT. Nobody knew how to do it. So go down to cloud stuff. It's essentially 2019. We all got going, right? We have our cloud strategy, right? Well, actually, I think the skills gap is still holding us back. We might have a strategy, but we aren't able to get there because everybody figured that Kubernetes was the way to go, right? So in 2018, 2019, everybody thought, oh, well, we'll just take all these legacy applications and we'll throw them in Kubernetes and we're done, right? And that's not actually the way it's working. So you're looking at the next things: the cloud automation, the CI/CD type delivery models, and everything else that you're going on there. Automation is a very, very high reward, but it's also very hard to get to. So actually learning the business process is an interdepartmental challenge, and getting this stuff right so that it's reproducible and reusable. I've had people come up to me and say, "How do you get there?" And it's actually very difficult. And mainly one of the things that comes down to is that the CIO needs to be a digital navigator. They need to have business consultancy skills. I've been saying this for about 3 or 4 years now. Um, and it's essentially what it comes down to is that if you keep chasing the next hot thing, you're never going to be able to get past the problem that skills are going to block you. So why is responsive hiring not the answer? And I think you know this quote, and it's kind of ironic, but if you go to the CFO and you say, "I'd like to hire another full-time employee," what's he going to say? You might be able to get a budget increase, but getting an additional headcount for this or that, unless it's a CEO project, that's like pulling teeth. And the problem is that if you start hiring responsibly, the requirements are constantly changing. So some of this stuff is going to get automated. The people that you're hiring need to be able to learn new skills. And the other thing is that usually we have delusional job posting wish lists. They're like laundry lists of, 10 years of experience with Kubernetes, PhD in computer science with a focus on ML. AI, demonstrated IoT prowess. Now, these people are not looking for a job. Now, it's just if the worst you put it, the more you put in there, the more you narrow it down, you're going to get people that don't have all this stuff that are going to be applying, and this is relevant. So follow along. So you think that you're going to get all these fresh-faced people ready to go. They've got a couple years doing exactly what your problem is under their belt, and they're going to accept a salary that you're able to afford. But the reality winds up being a mix of this. Now, let's say the talent pool in your area, your geography, is, let's say you're in Silicon Valley, where there's people, moving around all the time. Uh, you've got a bigger talent pool, but there's more competition. You've got this thing where the timing, maybe the person isn't looking for a job. If you've got headhunters running out looking for folks and like cold calling people and trying to attract them, you're going to have to pay a lot for them. And the next thing is really how attractive are you as an organization? And then you look at this little talent pool right in the middle, and it gets worse and worse and worse when you talk about the technology. You get this Venn diagram that begins to cut it down further and further until you don't have any candidates that are qualified anymore. And this is actually where you begin stumbling if you think you're going to just hire every time there's a new hot topic. So the first step, and this is something I've been saying since 2017, it's the 70-30 rule. Now you got to get the 70-30 rule under control. What the 70-30 rule is most of you, I don't know how many folks are in infrastructure and operations and how many IT leaders I've got here, but it's probably a decent mix. But you're all familiar with doing 70% of your time is spent just keeping the lights on. It's operations. You get absolutely no credit for it. If there's any sort of things that are unreliable, then of course you get penalized for it. But then 30% of your time, and you think about 40 hours a week, let's just say you've got 40 hours a week, 30% of your time is spent doing projects that actually do innovate and differentiate the organization. However, half of those, so 15%, are refresh. And that's where I mentioned the refresh hamster wheel. Anything you can do to cut that back saves you an enormous amount of time. You want to get, if it's 65-35, fine. If it's 60-40, you're golden. But you got to get more time. And the only way that you can do that is to simplify. Hint, hint, Rubrik. You automate. Hint, hint, Rubrik. Or you outsource. So if you have something that's not differentiated for you, then that's something that you may want to consider getting rid of. This skills gap really does hold you back, but the projects and innovation, I used to say, well, look, you can do it so much better on-prem. And I was like one of the last cloud deniers inside of Gartner. I was like, cloud, it's expensive. And yes, it is. Cloud is expensive. It can be more expensive. However, the refresh time, the time that you save, somewhere in there, I think mostly, I think it was probably COVID that was the tipping point for me. That if you allow yourself to stay on the hamster wheel of innovation, or sorry, of refresh, what you're looking at there is you're looking at essentially going over and over an RFP for a service or a storage array. And before you finish the migration, even get started with the migration, you have to start your next RFP. You're doing data migrations after data migrations, and that's something that you have to somehow get rid of. You have to simplify that whole refresh. And that's part of that 30 point. It's that 15%. Now we're talking hours of days here. The reason why is because you're going to try to plow this time back in to the organization itself. Now, you're not looking at doing, okay, well, we're going to do this across the board. We're going to save 10 or 20%. This is a game of numbers. This is a game of percentages. The next step, increase attractiveness. Now, it's kind of a joke. We got tape is still very reliable, but I think that how do I put this? tape is one of the most reliable mediums out there. However, if you're a CIO and you're looking to refresh the tape library in 2021, you're probably not going to get very far with the CFO. So I'm not going to knock tape as a medium. It's very, very, very good. However, there's a lot of things you can't do from it, and it's also kind of a bad look. So now there's nothing wrong with tape at all. In fact, a lot of cloud storage is actually tape on the back end. But the main thing is that what you're looking for is you're looking to retire legacy. Now, this isn't possible always, but retiring legacy makes the organization more attractive. Plus, it frees up a lot of time. Plus, it does all kinds of other things. So what you're trying to get control of here is your attrition and retention rates. So you're looking to become more attractive, and this is creating a cool atmosphere with cool projects. And now I'm not talking about a party atmosphere with keggers on Friday, party hats and all kinds of other stuff. You want to attract people that are looking for something cool so that they don't go elsewhere, and that they also are interested in working for you during the times when you can actually hire. So this is actually very interesting because what you're looking for there is possibly even, college. If you have it in a university in your area, you can pull from there, but only if you look cool. If you look old stodgy and dull and everything else, they're not going to want to come. They're not going to learn anything there. So this is actually something where you can begin to grow your own. Third, create a roadmap for career development. Now, this is, I'm talking about HR here to some degree. I mean, now remote work has kind of thrown everybody into limbo, but one of the things that you're going to be held up by over and over again is really, again, the skills gap. So how do you address this for the future? You're going to need to grow your own. You're going to need a different type of candidate. I was reading something the other day in the news, and it was talking about how people are going to have to retool every few years. And that means that if the skills are not automated, you can look for that type of stuff. And these are soft skills. These are attitudes. These are the way that people deal with things, the way that they approach a problem, the way that they handle defeat. Um, these are the people that are you're looking for, and you're looking, and I'll touch on something kind of interesting in the next slide. But one of the things that's kind of interest is that I came from support. My first job in IT was support. Now I'm a director of market intelligence. I was a Gartner analyst. Help desk is a great place to look for people who can handle problems, troubleshoot, work between departments, and solve things, all while keeping their head. So learning you all, and trust me, in support, you're constantly having to learn new things. So don't overlook the folks that you're bringing in to support, giving them a career path within the organization so that they can learn and become the next cloud architect might be something that can bring the right people on board. And then, of course, leveraging the skills training for cloud infrastructure and platform services, which is essentially Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and Alibaba. So what you're looking for there is any of the platform services and infrastructure. This is where I&O is going. You're going to have to be able to manage that and deliver it as a service to developers. So it's very important that you look at the vendors. There's not many, just 4, and decide, okay, well, which ones can we begin to leverage the training for these organizations to bring the folks up to speed. Now, I'm an old fan of I've got actually the TechNet subscription that I got when I got my MCSE back in '99. Now I'm falling on my goatee here, but I mean, yes, it dates me a bit, but yes, I was an NT4 MCSE and I got the TechNet subscription. But that stuff's still pretty much available online. So there's a lot of training that you can get through the MSDN TechNet type stuff. It's available online, but you got to have somebody who's actually interested in following it up and looking for, that training. And then finally, change your team's mindset. So mentoring and learning, upskill, reskill, this is going to be a constant thing. If you think that your team is fixed and not flexible, then you're going to have issues. So there's a book from Carol Dweck called Mindset, and it's a really good book. I've been using this on my children, actually, mainly because my daughter kept feeling like, she's learned two languages, German and English, and if you can learn German, then you should be able to learn anything. But anyway, the long and short of it is that you've got this situation where she didn't feel like she was good enough, and I used this book on her, and it's actually tried to switch her into the growth mindset so that she understands the value of practice to improve. Now, the key thing about this mindset thing is that it can be learned and unlearned. The growth mindset is something that you can switch into. Now, you're not always you're usually in a combination of both. But the growth mindset bounces back to success. It learns from failure. It seeks challenge. And the one thing that if you're going to ask an interview question, how do you handle loss? And see what people say. Do they let that failure define their self-worth? And if not, if it makes them more determined, like a Michael Jordan who, screws something up in a game and then goes and does 3 hours of free throws. That's the type of thing, where people think that folks are naturals, and that's not true at all. Natural ability is something, if you avoid stretching for that natural ability and you choose your comfort zone, then you are in the fixed mindset. If you try to look perfect all the time and no failure, now I'm not saying go out and fail, but if you try to look perfect and you use excuses in the blame game, and you're usually overrating your own ability, but you're also not the right kind of person for what you're going to need in the future. Now, I might be talking to a lot of fixed people and some growth, but the thing here is that you can unlearn the fixed mindset and learn the growth mindset. This is Carol Dweck mindset. Read it. Trust me, I've been using it on my kids and it's working. So I'm an old competitive swimmer. I understand how hard you have to work to get to something, and this is something that can really help you get to where you need to be with your challenges in the future. So this is something else from Gartner. What they did was they trained us on a lot of biases to get better in skills. In prediction. And this is something that also can be learned. I talked about this a good bit through 2020. I'll just kind of gloss over it right now. But there's a lot of biases where most of you on this call think that you are actually doing worse than your peers. And that's not always accurate. So what's kind of interesting is when I looked at the survey results, there's so many people out there that think that their peers are doing better that it can't be true. So it's this bias of you being close to yourself. Now, the reason why I'm talking about prediction is that we think that the vaccine is going to save us. We think that this is all going to go away. We think that we have all this under control, or we don't have it under control, and things are either going to be worse or better. But if you step back a little bit and actually look at other people's perceptions, you can begin to see something that's in the middle. So there's an uncertain future, but there's really a lot of the same problems. So one of the things about remote work is that regulators are not going to turn their heads forever, and neither is the CFO. So we think that we're going to be leveraging, this remote thing, but really what's going to wind up happening is that there's going to be something that's going to shake out. Now, I heard at the beginning of the pandemic, I heard people saying it's going to be, 60% reduction in real estate, and then it sort of dropped back down to being a situation where it was, 25 to 40%. I think that what we're definitely going to see, I was saying back then, be careful before you redo everything. People like to be together. And I think that's very true. People like to be together in the same workplace. The hybrid workplace is something, the whole, we're accessing our data center through a VPN or using VDI. VDI was actually never really a good solution. And now it seems like it's everywhere. It's getting better, but it's got a lot of management problems, a lot of overhead. Now, if that can be improved, then it's a decent solution. But otherwise, you're looking at accessing your data center through a VPN, punching through from a very insecure environment where, at least for me, I can lock my office door. I've got, I've got VLANs within my home. And that separates the IoT devices from the corporate network, so to speak. But I mean, securing the endpoints and everything else, these are problems for the hybrid workplace that we've all worked out, or we've left and then secured later. But the main thing is, and this is something I want to warn everybody about, is maintaining productivity for remote workers. The problem there is that after about 1 year, now we're at the 1 year mark, you start getting culture drift, and this is something I've I know about from Cisco. Actually, hearing the former CEO talk about this, they went remote and they found that after about a year, they started getting culture drift. So maintaining productivity and everything else is very important for the hybrid workplace. The hybrid data center, what mix is it going to be? Can you do it better or cheaper on-prem without breaking the bank for your operations? When does it happen? How do you deal with the skills gap for cloud infrastructure, platform services, serverless, everything else, all the discrete disciplines that are within the management of cloud architectures? What is the problems with visibility and security? How do you get security with everything? How do you deal with the visibility? Another very common response to surveys that I see is securing all this stuff that's suddenly catapulted up into the cloud. So let's just talk really quickly about the hybrid workplace. Now, for us, this is pretty relevant because you've got on the left-hand side the pros, the geographic liberation for talent sourcing. This is a big deal now. If you're able to pull in somebody who can actually do something for you, who doesn't live, you're already remote. You've proven that the remote can work for you. You've got a purposeful program to onboard people, and I'd say purposeful, and I mean it. It's not just bringing somebody on and 5 days after they've come on board, you send them a laptop and you expect them to, install a Linux image and somehow get to the corporate resources and find everybody. Your onboarding program is very important because if you alienate these people at the very beginning, you'll get a bad reputation. So one of the key things here is that the full-time employees in non-urban locations accept lower salaries. If you can get a lower, reduction in on-prem space, or just repurpose the space, that seems to be one of the things that I've been hearing a good bit, is that folks say, well, we're not going to cut the real estate, but we're going to totally reconfigure it. And also the next thing is that, unfortunately, I had this in a presentation last year as kind of a joke, in the summer, COVID 21. Well, guess what? We're getting all these mutations that are popping up. It's just a matter of time before, they say, well, one of these mutations can get by the immunization, and what do we do then? So what we're looking there is really, the pros for really doing this right, the resilience for future waves and mutations, and then also the environmental aspect and the quality of life aspect for commuting. The cons. Now, you all know this, and you're probably learning it very well. Isolation and mental health. This is my 11th year of remote work. Ergonomics. I've got a stand-up desk, a real office chair, and everything else. But if you think of OSHA violations for somebody working on an ironing board, workplace injuries and stuff like that, it's not going to be something that's going to get ignored. The problem is that have you seen? I mean, I guess you saw the thing with Trudeau and Biden. They were trying to make it a little bit more pomp and circumstance, but the mixed, augmented, and virtual reality is nascent at best, and really, there's not a lot of things that can really get past some of these limitations. Slack, Teams, they don't necessarily replace the in-person. Surveillance, there might be resistance Shared bandwidth, I've got two kids. One of them just snuck in behind me, and I tried not to get distracted, but he was, they both play Minecraft and other games. So you've got shared bandwidth. But then again, you've also got shared bandwidth with the whole neighborhood. So on-prem plus remote equals really rent times two. But one of the worst things is that informal collaboration takes a hit. Now, one of the things that's really important for CIOs or even team members is the informal time. This is actually an emergence theory type thing. You're more likely to get a job from somebody you know just slightly than one of your close contacts. And that's what happens with informal collaboration. If you don't have some form of method to get people together, then you take a hit on your ability to innovate. Because you're not able to get into the business. And if you're not able to get into the business, then you're not able to understand what the business requirements are for automation, for application refactoring, re-architecting, restructuring, redesign. And finally, let's get into the one last, and let's get into some questions. The hybrid data center, pros, electrical, um, you know, that's going to cut down if you're able to get things off. The one of the biggest limitations that I've run into with very large data centers, even small ones, is the power at the transfer station. It's something you can't get more of. So if you have a power limitation, maybe the cloud is something that solves it there. The next thing is really the internet uplink. You can recompete that and save a lot of money actually on, but the telecoms have not really have not been so generous with dropping costs for MPLS, for example. The refresh hamster wheel, get off of it. Focus on your differentiation, not your infrastructure. If and that's really what did it for me, was the differentiation is the key. And if you're focusing on your infrastructure and operations, then you're not getting points for doing things. So you need to simplify that rather dramatically. Um, Savings on real estate and no new legacy. The cons, really, moving to cloud. We talked about the skills gap. We talked about the security gap, the regulatory problems. Again, lift and shift. Cloud is not a hypervisor in the sky. That's your new mantra. If you haven't heard me say it before, cloud is not a hypervisor in the sky. You use lift and shift very, very sparingly. You need to refactor. That means put something in a container and smartly into a container. Putting, like, containerizing an application, usually if you don't have somebody that knows what they're doing, you're going to have some problems with it. So if that happens, what winds up happening, if you go with the lift and shift, 18 months of really screwing up and overspending, and that's really the TCO if done wrong. So I think we've got a few minutes for questions, and I'll end there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Robert. Very insightful. It just makes me think a lot. And I appreciate that. And we've got a lot of good questions. Obviously, you've made the audience think a lot as well. So let's go ahead and just kick it off with some of these questions. I guess the first one is from Mark, just a product question. And that is, does Rubrik do immutable storage?
Yes. So as I said, that the actual now there's a lot of vendors out there talking about immutable storage, but immutability is actually with Rubrik of a design question at the very beginning. So it was the file system as designed, forward chains, and appends only. We don't have a terminal that you can log into and access the storage at command line or anything. We use a lot of layers to harden the actual appliance. And that's really what you need. That type of thing is what you need for ransomware protection. The reason why is because immutability, if you have a lot of different moving components, then those components can be attacked individually. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's see. Next question. Moving on to Van Santa, who said, when it comes to remote work with cloud environments, how do I keep everyone engaged all 5 days of the week if the pandemic continues? Any suggestions for the best ways to using cloud to achieve maximum performance for the employees?
That's a good question, actually. And usually a good question. I don't know the answer, but in this case, it's that is a very good question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. And the reason why is because every business is in the same position. So thinking that you're falling behind because you're giving wellness days, for example, or being more human towards the employees. Now, you know, people are kind of a little bit burned out on Zoom and Zoom meetings. Now, I've been doing a lot of small roundtables and trying to exchange with people. If you create one of the things that I did at Gartner to keep engaged with folks was it was almost like a book report. Now, you'd find a book or some topic that folks are passionate about and they want to present to the organization. It's sort of like IT for IT training. That's one good way. So using cloud in terms of like the uh, I found a platform that was actually showing it was almost like a second life type thing. But I'm not
Yeah.
sure if we're going to get to VR or something like that. But yeah, you have to create the human interaction aspect. Um, and one other thing I suppose is really the realize that if you think that you're falling behind because people are, kind of drifting a little bit, then just realize that everybody's in the same situation. Now, that means that you're not falling behind if folks are, need more time. And the worst thing that you can do is really let people go during this time and have to rebuild the team on the other side of this. So just a thought. I mean,
Yeah. Excellent points. Good point. Yeah, I mean, I've seen, when it comes to working from home, just to set office hours, because it seems like once you're working from home, you're just always working. Whereas when you went into the office, you had set hours. You were there, you left at a certain time, and for the most part, you were kind of done with work. But when you're at home, it seems like you're working all the time. So I try to set some sort of same or similar office hours as before. This is an interesting kind of philosophical question. I'm curious if you have a take on. Paul says, in the post-COVID work world, are we more likely to be open to risk taking and entrepreneurship, or might folks be more risk averse after dealing with fear and worries of the last year? And then, should company culture shift to reflect those changes? Any
that's
thoughts
a
on
that's
that?
a great question. So I published something. I don't know if it's actually published yet or not, but it's actually I called it the pragmatic 20s. Now, if you think about this, I missed my birthday. It was my 50th birthday. I celebrated it with four people, and it was family. Um, Now, are we going to let loose after this? I think there's going to be a degree of that, but it really depends on the economic situation. Now, if you look at like stocks, they've been the only asset class that is without risk over the last year. It's the only asset class without risk, and that's really kind of an interesting thing because the governments keep backing it up. Now, entrepreneurs, if there is a few people or a large portion of the population that goes unemployed, then you're going to see a spike in entrepreneurial activity. Now that's it's going to be cyclic in that sense. It's going to be very similar. I don't think it'd be very different than the 2009 time frame. But it's an excellent question. I don't know the answer to it. I said pragmatic 20s as opposed to roaring 20s. That folks need to look for things that are functional, that work, that get you through. David, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. I mean, I think if this COVID problem could be solved with the snap of a finger and it's gone, then we could all go crazy and have a big party at once. But with things kind of taking time across the world and different places and countries and even cities, it's really hard to kind of set a date on it and just put everything back to normal quickly. So it to me that
Uneven
seems like it would.
distribution.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A- And Paul was asking, should the company or the workforce be encouraged to go back to the culture that we were in before.
I I think we can't unsee it, can we?
Right.
We've seen that it works. But I mean, here's the thing: it doesn't work perfectly. So if you look at like how open source teams work that never have met each other ever. They work collaboratively on a project. You have to actually be very active. You have to have like it has to be very purposeful. You can't just say, well, have at it, because the problem is that you get the stratification within the organization where the management team becomes less available, and that's a problem over time. It can last for a little while, a few months, but there need to be more town halls. There need to be more office hours. There need to be, I talked to there was a CIO. She was absolutely brilliant in England, and she created a virtual office hour in the morning and just allowed herself to be available just to her team. And that's something that if you think about like the analogs from actual offices, these passive interactions, losing those, it's really bad. Um, I mean, especially if you're a new CIO and you don't know the business people very well, you got to set up these Zoom calls and or WebEx or whatever, um, and try to connect with them with Slack or Teams. These passive interactions have to be fostered. There have to be more of them, because that's and it's actually the theory of emergence, that where it comes out of.
Excellent points. I mean, these passive interactions, they kind of have to be trained or almost forced for a while until we kind of figure out and get comfortable with it. Because you hear of a lot of companies that started over at the coffee shop on the back of a napkin. Just some people sitting around brainstorming, but you don't hear of a lot of companies that just started on a ad hoc Zoom call. So
Yeah.
I think pushing people over time and training us how to collaborate together still virtually is going to be a challenge, but maybe we'll get through it. Moving on, this is an interesting question from Ryan. You mentioned AR and VR. He's asking whether you think hologram type technology will be available to better replicate in-person meetings than current video
Wow.
meetings.
I wish. The problem is that the problem really winds up being duplex. So audio duplex, synchronization of the micro expressions with the voice itself. So that, I mean, and these are things that happen so fast that the very primitive brain that we have can see them. Dogs are excellent at seeing this type of stuff, these micro expressions, and it's really screwy with video. And I don't think it's going to be any more than laggy with holograms and stuff like that. And that's really one of the reasons why I think that people want to be back together. They crave it. And there's a reason why you're sitting in a meeting and somebody shifts uncomfortably, and that's almost like a disapproval or something, and it allows folks to understand where they are within the paradigm. I would love to be on a holodeck and have it really work well, but I don't see it other than working, to for the fun factor. Maybe a team building or a virtual escape room or something like that. That I don't see it as being a differentiator for us in 2021. Hopefully in the future, but the don't forget the team building aspect. These virtual escape rooms, security training, and stuff like that. Maybe sending out Oculus VR goggles to everybody on the team and going through some sort of an event.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Straight team
Maybe the
building.
hologram. Yeah, maybe the hologram type thing would work better for team building at this point with the current state of technology than an actual holodeck like on Star Trek. So you made a point that people crave to go back to this human interaction, and I'm sure there's a good portion of the population out there that does crave that. Vicky makes a point here that she said it's very hard to go back now. Employees are used to the new normal, and they really expect this is their new expectation. And so I'm sure there's also a good portion of the population that doesn't ever want to commute back to the office. They really don't want to sit in conference rooms for hours at a time. And so that may be the new normal as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even count the number of hours that I've saved by just commuting upstairs. Um,
Right, right.
Live at work.
Next question here from Paul. Again, he said, trying to track the future of corporate culture and the individual needs of a workforce affected by the pandemic, economic, education, and career development is so critical. And it's also such a very tricky question. Thank you for taking time on that today. That was his comment. Not a
Oh,
specific
cool.
question. Do you have a explanation for rent times two, or did you talk about that
Oh,
at
yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
point?
No, I didn't hit that. The rent times two is if we're maintaining a remote workforce and a data center, we have to secure both. And then there's going to be the expense of maintaining real estate, maintaining the electricity for a data center we're not using. So if you think about it, like we built this data center that's high performance. It's got a data gravity that's on premises. The network is optimized for serving up the folks that are sitting at their desks, and suddenly you're accessing it via VDI or VPN. Ugh. So I mean, there's that, and also just the fact that suddenly you're thinking about, oh, how do I secure these folks? And this is something I've been thinking about a good bit. Is that there's some people that are not going to be allowed to work from home because they can't demonstrate a secure environment. Now that they might be the ones that are asked to come in. Now it might be that they deal with credit cards and you can't demonstrate that they don't have a cell phone on the premises, or they work in a secure environment or don't have a secure environment and can't lock the door. Their network isn't up to snuff. Somebody could, theoretically, they can't demonstrate that their smart TV isn't listening to them. Or trying to contact their computer. I mean, these are real things. I mean, we don't allow these devices on in our premises, and if we do, we wall them off in a VLAN. So, but we're not doing that with remote employees. So that's something just to kind of get you thinking about the times two.
Great point. Yeah, great point. Brian said that he really liked your thoughts on office hours and wellness days. It's the little things that can go really far sometimes to help employees. So great feedback on
Right
that.
on.
Another question: is there any data analysis that you've seen to study the performance of remote work or hybrid cloud-based solutions or impact? Any suggestions for data or research?
Well, outside of like, I mean, IDC has some free stuff. I'm former Gartner, and I'm recommending IDC, and that's legit. This is good stuff. They did a lot of stuff during 2020. They have actually the IDC Directions is free this year. It's on 2 different days. That might be really worth checking out. But in terms of the analysis of remote performance, now the problem is that folks kind of over rotate and they spend too much time at work. And that's what David was saying. You kind of forget that you need to decompress before you walk downstairs and face the family stuff. If you even have a dedicated work area. But the long and short of it is that this is straight anecdotal stuff from John Chambers. He did a presentation with, he's a mentor for our CEO. And he said, when he was doing Cisco, that they noticed a problem with culture drift after 1 year. We're at the 1 year mark. And this is something that I mean, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Check out John Chambers. He actually on Twitter, he'll post stuff and talk about like some of his theories and things like that. He has experience. Only one that really has any experience like this to point to. But I think that I've I've seen both types of organizations and some that do it sort of mittelmäßig, to use the German term, fair to the middling. So, I mean, cloud-based solutions, the advantage there is that the employees are accessing them directly as long as you have something like Okta for single sign-on, managing the identity access management. So at least it's not coming in through your VPN that was designed for your road warriors, or over a very fast uplink that costs a lot of money. I hope that
Absolutely.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Here's another question that came in. They're asking if you have any suggestions for AI or ML technology that can be used for remote work related analytics to help human resources find employee pulse or engagement. So, I mean, you're not chatting with people at the water cooler, every morning, or the coffee pot saying, "Hey, how's it going? Did you have a good weekend?" So how do we kind of replace that? Is there any technology, or is it just
I,
kind of these
I,
get-togethers?
I think what's being asked is that help human resources find the pulse. This question is asking, like, how can we find people that are drifting,
Yeah.
or maybe getting disenfranchised, and take action. I'm sorry, I recognize the question. I just don't know exactly what to recommend there. But I recognize the question, and yeah, that is a very we're going to have more AI, ML type assistants that are going to, we're going to be able to program ourselves. There are those that are out there, but in terms of analytics of employee performance or mental health indicators, I don't know any of that I can recommend. I'm sorry.
No problem. I mean, and maybe you talked about, wellness days and team building, and maybe those types of things would keep people from drifting in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
all right. And I know you mentioned a book in your presentation. Can you talk about that a little bit? And is it good for IT teams?
It's extremely good for IT teams. It's I don't get any money for this. This is just something that it's the book is named Mindset, the New Psychology of Success, by Carol Dweck, Dweck. You should be able to find it. Like I said, it can help you yourself. It can help you with relationships. You don't have to read the whole thing. You can kind of get, in broad strokes through a couple chapters, but it should teach you to look at yourself and look at your teams and help your teams look and understand, like, when you're flipping between the fixed and the growth mindset. And it is very helpful, I think, because if you begin to look that way, then you should be able to get to a point where you're looking for people that are in the growth mindset or that can get into the growth mindset. It's easiest if you find somebody who's already there. They're the go-getters that are looking for, they don't get discouraged when they lose. But interestingly enough, like, folks that are in large families, the youngest brother or something like that winds up being, I'm a little brother, so I think I've been in the growth mindset for a while, trying to chase my 2.5 year older brother. He was really good at sports, so I finally beat him with swimming, but he'd crush me now. But anyway, uh, it's just something that you're looking for somebody that has that eternal yearning. It's called Sehnsucht in German. That yearning to improve, and that's the type of employee you're looking for, and you're looking to convert your existing employees into that mindset.
Excellent. I bought the book myself. I need to get started reading it. It looks like a fantastic resource to help, you as an individual as well as a IT team. So thank you for sharing that with us. Robert, I'm afraid we're running out of time here on our event today. I learned a lot. I hope the audience did as well. Before we go, I want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. That's going to Juan Ceja from Utah. Congratulations. We'll reach out to deliver that. Again, Robert, thank you so much for being on the event.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be here. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
And thank you to Rubrik for supporting today's webinar. Check out Rubrik.com there in your handout tab for more information on the innovative Rubrik data management backup and recovery solution. And hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.